shifts the focus of learning from the teacher teaching to the kids taking ownership of learning, which I believe is the single most important thing we need to achieve. An approach that works for entertainment content does not work for education content, right? You want the child to spend as little time as possible and get the most out of it.
So today we have with us Mr. Rakshay Saxena, who is the co-founder of Avanti Fellows and also an Ashoka Fellow. He was awarded the Draper Richards Kaplan Fellowship and Echoing Greens Fellowship in 2012 for his work at Avanti. Before venturing into the venture, he was founding member of Heartflow, a venture-backed medical diagnostics company. His prior work experience includes management consulting with the BCG in India, project implementation with the United World Food Program, and fundraising and strategy at the International Save the Children Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us, Akshay.
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks for having me.
And to begin with the conversation, so from when it was established, and it has now been 20 years, with students from across the country being a part of it. So how would you say the Avanti Fellows has developed over the years?
So I think we've changed in how we go about working a fair bit, right? So when we started, I think I always make this joke that because Krishna and I both went to IIT, the only thing we understood was getting kids through the JEE. So when we started in the early days, we were very focused on helping kids clear the IIT JEE exam, and I would say our lens was relatively narrow. But I think it's been almost 10 years now, and a few things that we've learned over time have really helped us, use the same pedagogies and the same tools we developed for the JEE and apply them to science and math learning more broadly. So, for instance, now our primary focus is working with kids from grade 9 through 12, helping them learn math and science, and also parallelly a very strong focus on working on system change, which is working with government systems to build within them the capacity to use education technology appropriately to improve outcomes in science and math learning. So we are now working with almost 300 government schools, both in the Navodaya Vidyalaya system as well as in the Haryana government, where we are working with teachers, government administrators, and providing the content and tools necessary to help improve math and science learning. In addition to our core work, which is helping low-income kids get through the IIT JEE and NEET and become engineers, doctors, and have thriving and fulfilling careers.
Perfect. And the scale that any educational intervention actually needs to achieve to be able to make, even a small dent in the education system, or even make that change for the students to be able to learn better and the learning outcomes to be improved. So there has to be a sense of partnership or even, collaboration to happen. So how is Avanti taking steps towards collaboration and partnerships to further that expansion?
So it's been, I think, the single biggest multiplier in our existence, right? So partnerships have been very important, and in every form. So like I mentioned, obviously the government is a very important partner, right? So both in the case of the Navodaya Samiti as well as the Haryana government, both in terms of taking on a significant part of the cost to really help giving us, the amplification we need, which is, getting the government officials involved, getting people to monitor programs, helping train teachers. Like none of this is possible without government partnership in a deep, meaningful way. And in Haryana especially, and in the Samiti, Samiti starting from the commissioner downwards and the Haryana government system starting from the chief minister downwards, that's been what really allowed us to do our work. Also, I think partnership within the sector has been incredibly important to us. So many of our interventions are informed by and helped by organizations like Pratham, who've been doing wonderful work many years before us, right? So much of the remedial content we use is taken from and built in collaboration with Pratham. Now in Haryana, we're helping coordinate a bunch of the COVID response, and almost 1 million kids are learning every day. The content that's actually going out to them is partly ours, but a large part of it is from Khan Academy, from Tic Tac Learn, which is funded by CSF, and Pratham and many other organizations. And I think I really believe that the only way, to the point you made, that anything meaningful can happen here is a kind of a completely open collaborative ecosystem between government, between NGO partners, private sector, and of course funders. And on that front, I think we've been very fortunate. We've had very long-term funding for all of our projects, right? So whether it was, the Tata family, I say, there's many different funders in that pool, to JP Morgan now, to the Dell Foundation, to Infosys, right? We've always had funders who've allowed us to function relatively freely for long periods of time. And that's allowed us to innovate, because in the absence of committed, secured funding, innovation is nearly impossible. So very, very important. I think perhaps the most important thing.
Okay. And like you mentioned that you've already been funded by a lot of these international organizations as well, and for a longer period of time. But that is something which a lot of other educational initiatives, which might be good on ground, might have the scale also, and might have like a proof of concept, but still struggle with a sustainable funding. So what tips or suggestions would you have in terms of, you having successfully done that to these organizations, for them to be able to, garner such sustainable funding, or say a lifelong sort of a partnership with an international or a national organization?
So I think a few important things which worked well for us. I think the first is, I think it actually helps to have a bit of a focused, narrow approach when you start, right? So it's much easier to get, so much of this long-term funding, right, is either available to test innovations, which is that you actually have a certain product or a approach that you want to test. And then people will fund you for a few years to really test it and evaluate it. And you have to be open to evaluation. And I think once the evaluation comes in, then a lot of funding is available to scale up proven evaluations, right? So what I found, at least in my experience, is that there's a lot of, most organizations that do this well, which is clearly articulate what's innovative, new, clear about what they're doing, are willing to evaluate it with data, and are then willing to take these findings to get funding, tend to be able to find, long-term grants and long-term support, both during the innovation phase as well as the scale-up phase. And there are many examples in education, right? So Teach for India, Gyanjala, Pratham, many good examples of this having happened, right? Well before we came, and we learned from them. But I think the trap that I think it's easy to fall into, and I think it happens, and it's not really, avoidable in many cases, is many smaller interventions, right? You tend to sort of go from donor to donor and do what the donor is asking you to do. And I found many social entrepreneurs tend not to push back, right? So most times, funders come in with a certain idea of what they want to do. I have found almost 100% of them are open to changing that idea. But if you don't push back or don't engage in a conversation, that will never happen, right? Yeah. So I do think it's really, really important, even if it's a really small organization, right, with like 5 lakh in budget, to be very clear about what is it that new that you're bringing to the ecosystem, right? And what's your focus? Because it's very easy to fall into the trap of doing like 10 things in a mediocre manner for 10 different funders, right? And that's not going to help anybody in the long run.
Perfect. And that is actually amazing to know that how you're like just staying by your point of not changing for anyone. Because end of the day, that is what counts for a sustainable education intervention, I would say. You just stay true to whatever the concept you started with, and just experiment if in case you feel like something needs to be changed or tweaked, which will help improve or, maximize the outcomes there. So coming to another stakeholder of the system, which are the teachers, which have been in a soup currently because of the COVID situation also, because now they cannot be taking the classes in person. So what is it that Avanti is doing to empower the teachers? So both pre-COVID and post-COVID, what are your plans to make teachers more empowered to reach out to students?
So I think, even ignoring COVID, right? I think teachers are the most overworked, under-resourced, under-trained people in this country. I really believe, what we expect of them versus what we give them is completely out of whack. And I think most of our journey has been about providing teachers with tools that help them perform dramatically better than they would otherwise, right? So Avanti's core intervention does 2 things, which is, one, shifts the focus of learning from the teacher teaching to the kids taking ownership of learning, which I believe is the single most important thing we need to achieve. That takes a lot of burden off the teacher, right? If kids start learning collaboratively, they start teaching each other, that's really, really important. But also, to be able to facilitate that kind of learning, you need high quality content, you need good worksheets, you need good teacher handbooks. You need to provide the teacher with tools which allow them to do something new. And that was always our core intervention. I think in a variety of different settings, whether it's preparing kids for the JEE or just helping them do well on their school exams. COVID, in many ways, it's all in all, obviously it's a tragedy, right? Like, I think what's happening to government school students right now is is tragic. But at the same time, I think I would say about 30-40% that are being able to access technology right now. What we're also seeing in terms of adoption, both from the teachers and the students, is quite incredible and very, very exciting, right? So, for instance, literally, I would say a week into the school shutdown, we were already seeing most teachers, creating WhatsApp of their own accord, not even on instruction from the state, right? Creating WhatsApp groups for their kids, starting to send them some assignments, starting to record some video, jaisa taisa. Many of them even don't even live in urban areas, right? So, bahar khet mein khade hoke, all kinds of very cool stuff was happening on its own, right? And I think I think for the first time, and at least in my experience, really, connected the teachers and the students, right? Where I think the kids got a very, very clear sense that, hey, these teachers are really trying to look out for us, because it was not prompted by the state or not prompted by any kind of official order, and largely came from a point of caring and wanting to help, right? Because government school teachers have job security, right? It's not even like the private school setting where they had to do something, right? I think since then we worked very, very closely with multiple states, multiple stakeholders, including BCG, the Niti Aayog, many of the other organizations I mentioned, to figure out how can we make this do the same thing. How do we make this structured? How do we make it better? So, for instance, now across a single set of messages actually goes out to almost 8 lakh kids every day now. Where what we've done essentially is we've taken content from our content, but also content from many of the other people I mentioned, TikTok-Learn, Khan Academy, even private players like Doubtnut, etc. We've packaged that into daily lessons. So here's a playlist of what you want to study. We put assignment sheets, we put the PDFs of a variety of stuff that the kids can do to try and create a day by day teaching plan, right? And what's happening right now is, these teaching plans are being pushed through WhatsApp groups, SMS, etc. to 8 lakh, 9 lakh kids every day. What's incredibly, I think, encouraging, right, is two things. One, when we started, only about 20-25% of the kids were actually being able to click on these links or do anything, right? That number is up to 40% now in 3 months, right? With almost no real support, honestly, no monetary support going from anywhere, right? Like, it's not like they're being bought phones, but it's essentially the parents and the kids realize, hey, this thing is, it's a meaningful interruption. We care about education. Let's, get us, and 99% is the dad's phone or the mom's phone is being given to the child for 2 hours a day, right? So that, I think, just getting that going has been incredible. And we take a weekly test in Haryana, right, where the participation rate is 99%. So 99% of the kids somehow find a way to take a 15-20 minute Google form based test. Okay. We started now doing subjective testing because that's what they have to do, right? So we started asking them to submit pictures and like really cool stuff, right? So I mean, obviously many kids are taking pictures and submitting them. Some of them have found access to a text editor on their phone and are typing out these long form answers and sending it, right? So I think to me, if you asked me before COVID, would any of this be possible, I would have given you like a very guarded answer. No, poor kids, they don't have access. I think what this is telling us is that they will find access if what you provide them is useful. And this will never replace classroom teaching. And to be honest, even the data that we are tracking in terms of how much they're learning, kids are learning, which is good. Are they learning as well as we'd like them? Absolutely not, because obviously this is a constrained environment, right? But we are being able to get coverage in the sense that, they're scoring about 50-60% on an average on the test we are giving them, which is not bad, right? So it's better than, clearly this is helping. And what's even nicer is now that there's structure, right? The teachers are being able to do more, right? So they know that the assignment for the day has been given. They know that when the kids submit answers, it's from that assignment. They can get, many of them are trying to create content and push it out, right? We're starting to see many NGO partners sort of reach out to say, hey, can we implement something of this sort? The foremost amongst which we recently worked with is Masoom, which is working with kids in night schools, right? Who are out of school kids. So I do think, we're doing all of these things and we'll keep doing more, right? In helping teachers. We're trying to figure out formats which work well for the teacher to teach using just their mobile phone. And those things are working really, really well. And I think what this will do is, whenever we come out of COVID, and I hope it is soon, but whenever we do, I think organizations like us, and in fact, the broader NGO sector will have another toolkit in their arsenal, right? Which is, now that we've seen that kids do learn in direct to student, content dissemination, do learn at home, WhatsApp groups can be used well. I do think this will become a very, very important tool, right? Because to this point, the only tools we had beyond training and systematic stuff, right, was give them books, give them workbooks, and do something in the classroom with technology, either videos or something or the other. But now that we can believe that a good number of these kids can also be reached directly on the mobile phone, I think that just changes the game in terms of what is available to organizations. And my hope is that the government takes cognizance, right, and that budgets are allocated to give kids access to the internet, right? Because I think that's really, really going to be incredibly important. Access to devices, access to the internet is going to be important. There's many ways in which this can be done, through financing schemes, through subsidizing, through a variety of things. What we are finding is the cost of this is like, less than 100 rupees a month. It's like 60, 70 rupees a month in internet subscription. And the amortized cost of a device is again in the order of 100 odd bucks a month, right? So 150 rupees per child is a cost that any government can afford even in the current budgets. So my hope is that this really starts to, lay the groundwork for something that's, more, I would say, transformative and step changing in this ecosystem going forward.
I would say hope is something that all of us are kind of currently like working with and hopeful for a future altogether. But like you mentioned, that access is something that even the government would need to work. But I still would say that the access has improved tremendously, like you also mentioned. For a lot of students who are finding newer ways to use the internet or even access the classes, WhatsApp groups are there, teachers making videos on YouTube. But another question that comes out of all this is that as much as the access has improved, the content has deteriorated. Because now anyone could just create content and put it out there and be like a subject matter expert, but they might not really be there. So how is Avanti making sure that the content that you are floating out? So like you mentioned, you already have partnerships with a lot of NGOs or other think tanks or knowledge groups. But how do you judge the content to be suitable for a particular student, and how do you make sure the flow is consistent and as well as something that can be improved over time?
So I think, Deepak, you're touching on a really important point, right? Which is, I think this, to be fair, this problem has always existed. There's always a plethora of content, right? And if you look at algorithms, which, where is this content hosted? Most of it is hosted on YouTube and a bunch of other things. And the algorithms on these platforms are not optimized for learning, right? They're optimized for placing ads. So, it's not always the most appropriate or the most, coherent content that comes to the top. So far, I think the approach we've used is largely one of, working with credible organizations, vetting their content in great detail, making sure that it's standards aligned, and then, picking, right? So essentially we are curating right now, right? And I think the lens we tend to use is obviously simple things like, is it in Hindi? Because most of the kids we're working with are Hindi medium kids, right? Is it in Hindi? Is it aligned to the standards that they're supposed to study to? Is it grade level appropriate? Which is, is it not too hard? Because it's not useful to expose kids to stuff they don't understand, right? And then we're testing it every week, right? So every week we take a test on the stuff that we pushed out. If the numbers dip dramatically, we know that the content we pushed out didn't really work. Or if it improved dramatically, we know something we did work. So I think that loop is what we are using, right? And I think so far that's been really, really helpful. And we've changed many things along the way, right? So how much content we are pushing, what types of videos we are pushing, we are altering that as we are seeing data. I think in the long run, though, I think it's going to be really, really important for there to be curation and for curation to be done well, right? So even if you look at government platforms like Diksha and others, right? I think the approach so far has been कि हम content डाल देंगे, and then kids will somehow figure out how to study. I don't believe that works. In fact, I believe you have to lean on the side of being overtly organized in terms of content as opposed to being disorganized, because an approach that works for entertainment content does not work for education content, right? You want the child to spend as little time as possible and get the most out of it, because that's the constraint, as opposed to spend as much time as possible binge watching, right? So I think curation will be really important. There aren't any frameworks in place. There is no way to actually judge most content right now. And that's something we're hopefully starting to work with. I mean, we're already starting to work on through this effort that we're doing during COVID, where at least we're starting to figure out which tools are working and so on and so forth. And we're trying to now work with multiple other organizations to start to at least create a repository or library of at least non-profit content that's been made to these standards and for certain applications. The hope and the dream would be that eventually there's a way where anyone could post content, it could be discovered organically, It could be served to kids in an A/B testing way, and you could grade it. We're starting to work on algorithmic things that we can do to do that. But I think the first wave will really just be putting out the mandate clearly in terms of this is the kind of content that's needed, finding organizations that have made it, curating, validating it, and putting it all in one place. So that stuff we're already working on, and trying to set it up in a way where it's not owned by us, but owned by the ecosystem. So fingers crossed on getting that done.
Okay. And coming to the end of the conversation, so what is it that you intend to do in the future as a part of Avanti or otherwise, even, say starting a new collaborative thing, like you said, for content, for anyone to post a content and it to be available free of cost, and A/B testing to happen for the students, for you to know like which content works best for students. And what is your idea, so per se, considering India or to even scale globally for your programs?
Yeah, so I think one is, going forward, we have a lot of problems to solve with our core programs, right? And they'll all come back. In the sense that, in both fronts, for instance, the Navodaya program where we ran it ourselves for many years with very, very good outcomes. The big challenge right now we've taken on is, can we train the government school teachers to do it themselves? And what do we need to put in place to make that work, right? So sort of transferring the ownership from us to the government system. And in Haryana, it's the same thing that we're doing again. And in Haryana, there's an RCT in place being done by JPAL, right? So I think, and we're finding many things don't work, to be honest, right? We're finding more things that don't work than work right now. So I think there's a lot of development and iteration that has to happen to allow systems to take charge of even the core model. On online, I think the big thing that I have learned, and I think this is what we're going to really focus on, is that unless, firstly, or whatever platform it is, right? Whether this platform that is disseminating it to kids as well as the platform which is evaluating it has to be owned as a public good, right? So it has to be owned by the state, right? So it's very, very important that if SMSs are going to kids in Haryana, that the state government is involved. That's the only way that you can create some kind of controls, you can get at scale, and you can truly evaluate it. And that the know-how, right? This is a very, very different skill set from what a typical DEO or education department has had in the past. So it's going to be really, really important to educate them about, look, this is how digital content is consumed. This is a typical length of time that a video is watched. If they're watched for 30% of their time, that's a good video, right? This is how you design assessments. This is how you evaluate them. So I think a lot of this knowledge building and knowledge transfer has to happen to actors and administrators within the state governments. So that's going to be a very, very big focus for us going forward. And I think the last thing is to ensure that this ecosystem, right, that this display, that this availability of content, we are fortunate to have some of the technical know-how as well as the grant money to take point on some of this. But the goal has to be that this platform or whatever this is almost like a set of standards that multiple nonprofits follow. Because if we don't align on standards, right, as an ecosystem, then it's going to be very difficult for all of our stuff to be used by people, right? And then we end up falling into the bucket of vendors, which we don't want to do, right? So I think commercially, on the for-profit side, there are many, many well-funded players. I think they will do their own thing in terms of getting to the government. But I think as the development sector, the main thing we need to ensure is that at least we align ourselves around, standards, evaluations, etc., so that there is no dissonance and confusion in the narrative that we present, right? And that will allow us to also, I think, create the right kind of push and pull for the commercial entities, right, to build content, for this audience in the right way, right, with good incentives, because I really believe they will end up playing a very big role, right, given the amount of resources that they have. So I think if we can use the kind of running start that COVID has given on this front and really help build this ecosystem over the next few years, that will be amazing. And I'd be very happy if we can get that done.
And thank you so much for joining us, Akshay. It's been wonderful hearing from you about how we can democratize the content, empower the teachers, and probably also engage the students in the content and, grasping more concepts there. So thank you once again for joining us. It's been an immense pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deepak. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.